And also the beauty of editing. I can just take out anything we say that's stupid.
Which is usually a lot.
So much. And so much more every day. I'm Jeannie Bowerman.
And I'm Ciara Duggan.
And you are listening to The Story Will Save You. Welcome, Megan. Is it Tusing?
Tusing, like to sing karaoke, except spelled with a U instead of an O.
Do you sing karaoke?
If I've had at least one libation. Is that the right word? Libation? Yes,
only one?
I do.
Oh my God, it takes a few.
It does not take much. I actually, my tolerance is really low now because I don't really drink because it dries out my voice.
Oh my God.
So I don't really drink. Smart. But then I sniff wine and I'm drunk and then hungover for 3 days. So mocktails have become a new favorite for me. It's still the excitement of a drink without any of the consequences.
Also just much healthier. So good for you.
There's still a lot of sugar in you might not think you can get hungover from a mocktail, but the sugar is
it's death.
Still wires you. Yeah.
As the margarita queen, I can tell you it's the sugar in the mix. And if you use mixer as opposed to just lime juice, that's what kills people. People always think it's the tequila. It's not the tequila. It's the sugary margarita mixer. Avoid those.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we're already off topic, you guys. We're already off topic.
There was a topic?
Don't you worry. It will all circle back around. I promise.
We're actually not off topic because I met Megan at a bar.
That's right. At a drinks mixer thing at Thriller Fest.
Also want to tell you, Megan, how much you've changed my life. You and Ciara, the two of you right here.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
it was right. It was at Thriller Fest that I met you. And then I'm telling Ciara about how I met you. And then I was like, I don't listen to audiobooks. What's the thing with audiobooks? And Ciara's like, oh my God, you have to listen to audiobooks.
It's all I do.
Now I have gone through so many books since I saw you because I listen to them when I'm walking the dog. I listen to them when I'm making dinner. I'm listening to them when my husband thinks I'm listening to him.
Yep. Well, here's the thing. I feel like I'm reading all day. I'm reading other people's work. I'm looking at the computer. I'm looking at physical writing. And when I actually want to enjoy a story and relax, I cannot bring myself to open a book. It just feels like work to me. So that's when I got into audiobooks, probably 3 years ago. And now I nearly, except for a couple pages before bed, I'll always have one book on my bedside table. Other than that, I exclusively listen to books. So it's exciting to have you on because I know nothing about what actually goes into making an audiobook.
I can't wait to
so
tell
this is
you.
exciting.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't guessed, Megan narrates audiobooks. That's why we have her on. So Megan, tell us a little bit, give us a little spiel about what you do, and then we'll dive right into questions.
Sure. Megan Tusing here. Live in Brooklyn, New York. I've been an actor in New York City since the early 2000s. I'm going on almost 2 decades of being here, which is really exciting. But for the last 7, maybe 8 years, I've been primarily an audiobook narrator. I fell into that because one of my lovely mentors and now dear friends had suggested I give it. She was like, this would be a really good fit for you, and took me under her wing, let me shadow her, introduce me to casting directors. And then when I got my foot in the door, it was just, one job beget another job. And then it just started rolling. And after about 2 years of intense hustle, I was able to be a full-time narrator. So as an actor in New York, you often have what's called a survival job. As you're building your career, right? So meaning a lot of people wait tables. I worked in a corporate office as an executive assistant. And after then, so I was able to leave that job, and now I'm a full-time audiobook narrator. So
yay.
That's amazing.
And I've narrated over 360 books. Which I should say that's the numbers that we use, but I don't know that that's an accurate tell of a narrator's experience, because you could do 360 children's books, which are only 1 hour each, or you could have done 3 books that are 40 hours each. It's not, I don't know that it's always the most accurate way of telling someone's experience, but it is kind of a measurement we use in my industry. But I guess I could say I've done a lot of books, but I've had a lot of experience being in the business, not as much as some, but I do feel a little seasoned now. And then my acting background really, because I went to school for theater, and feel like that really has helped.
Having just started listening to audiobooks, I would recommend that people, when you go to get an audiobook, listen to a sample because your voice is lovely.
Oh, it's beautiful. I was going to say that. I was like, oh beautiful. My God.
And like, not to diss on anyone, because I really don't like to do that. And I will not name the names of the books that, oh my gosh, I just couldn't. But I'll give you an example of why I couldn't. And I think this is why it's great to look for somebody like Megan, who's an actor, who's trained and knows maybe different dialects or can really use her voice to help. Like, it's like a radio show to help illustrate a different character. Like, I was listening to a book. He's talking and he gets the point that the characters are having a dialogue, but the cadence of all the characters is exactly the same. So I had no idea who was talking.
That's hard.
Or this one that I'm listening to right now, which shall remain nameless. It's a big book, New York Times bestselling, great book, popular, but it's cut up into sections, like parts. And each part is narrated in the first person by a different narrator. The first narrator, bless her heart.
Oh,
but she was so overly dramatic. Everything was just the end of the world. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to punch her.
Oh, and it pulls you out of it too. It pulls you out of the story because it's so distracting.
I will say in defense of these narrators.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Let me just say.
Help me.
Everybody, it's like ice cream. Not everybody likes the same flavor. So someone may sound overly dramatic to you and perfectly reasonable to someone else. Or somebody, like, there could be a voice that you may not subconsciously realize reminds you of like a bully in high school you didn't really like. And so you're automatically turned off. That happens a lot with casting. We think sometimes like authors pick the voice of who they think best represents the character. But sometimes you may sound like someone that they're just like, you just remind me of someone I can't deal with. So I will say it's a very subjective business. And I do agree that people should listen to samples because you're going to be spending on an average 9 hours with this person. And I've gotten wonderful reviews and I've gotten very nasty reviews. And all of it is really like taste of what people like. It's really funny. I can see the juxtaposition of somebody giving me a 5-star and a 1-star right underneath it. And I think, like, again, I'm going to keep doing what I do and bring the story to it. And it's the listener's job to choose the experience for themselves that they want to have and know. The one thing I think I wish that listeners would do is realize they don't have to finish a book if they don't. There's a thing called DNF, did not finish. I agree, man. Do not put yourself through the torture. Just stop listening to the book and go read it.
I feel like there's also times though where it's like you're listening to a book and you're like, wow, this reader I'm not jiving with them. But then there's been times I'm like, I don't think it's the reader. I think it's the writing. I think the writing it's not there. It's not great. And the reader can only do what they can do with what they're given too.
It's fascinating that the different experience you have as somebody who's used to reading books all the time and then starts listening. And by the way, the DNF, we actually did a whole podcast episode about that. Matt was on with me. We did a whole thing of like all the reasons why we do not finish. It's really
life's too short.
What I love about the audiobook is it makes it entertainment for me. Like, but I also can still listen as a writer and think to myself, oh, I love that. Oh, that line sounds wonderful. Because sometimes you read a line and you're like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. But then also when you hear a line spoken, wow, I wish I wrote that.
The writing sinks in more when I'm listening to it, especially if it's like, I don't know, said beautifully. I don't know. Or in like, if there's like a dramatic pause and then it's like, because if I'm reading it, I'm just like, I'm not dramatically pausing while I'm reading. I'm not stopping to gasp. I'm just reading the book. But when I listen to it, I'm nearly forced to like be in the scene more. And I don't know.
Well, that's the dream, right? When you have the best thing is when you have a book that's just beautiful and really well written. And then you have a narrator who just perfectly vibes and just embodies that book, then it's such an incredible experience because you not only get the author's amazing writing, but you get layered another artist's interpretation of that work. And the best thing that can happen to a narrator, well, two things, is the author can say, I heard this book in my head differently and you did it better. Or you can have someone give you the best like compliment I've gotten is, I forgot it was you. When someone's listening to the story and they like forget that it's being narrated by someone, that they're just so into it, that they're just so present.
I would love to know things that about your job and about what you do that maybe people wouldn't know and wouldn't really appreciate and understand the complexities behind it. Cause it's like you hit play and it's like your mom's reading you a bedtime story kind of thing. Like you don't have to think and you're not necessarily thinking about the process and everything behind it. Like what are some of the things that surprised you about this career choice that it never occurred to you were a thing?
The time. It takes so much time. It probably takes 5 to 6 actual hours to make one what we call finished hour. So the first hour of an audiobook you listen to probably took 6 hours and probably took a team of 5 people, maybe more, depending on the structure of the production company, because there could be a person who preps the script, a person who does the research. Pronunciations are really big. We do our best. We still mess up, but you got to try your best to get pronunciations correct. Then there's the actual narrator needing to do their research of getting the characters in their body and figuring out voice choices, or if it's nonfiction, figuring out the author's intent. Then there's the actual sitting down and recording the book, which we're humans. We mess up. It takes me about 2 what we call in studio, well, what I say studio hours, so like actual hours to record one finished hour, typically. But if the book's really hard, like I just did a nonfiction travel book, we got maybe 1 hour to every 4 hours because there were so many difficult pronunciations and we had to just stop every sentence to look something up because it's important that you pronounce things right in a travel book. So that takes the time. Then it goes into what we call QC, quality control. Somebody listens to it, listens for the mistakes. Somebody does all the fancy editing and mastering and all the glossy stuff I have no idea how to do. We have to go back and fix the mistakes. Then it finally goes into the last step of like maybe going through another level of QC to get listened to for just one more pass to make sure it's A-okay. And then it goes live. And it's like, you just hear us reading, but there's so many things that have to go into place for this book to reach your ears. And it's sort of like knitting. You knit a hat, right? The hat you would buy at H&M for $5. Not H&M. Let's think about a homemade hat, right?
Right.
If somebody sat down and made that hat, the yarn probably cost $35. Then the person probably took hours to make that hat. And then a person picks it up and they're like, yeah, I don't really want to pay more than like $20 for this, even though that was probably that should be like $300 for the time it took. But people don't necessarily appreciate it because things are so easily made now. Things are instant gratification. So I know everyone's like, oh, it's just reading a book, but it's a lot harder than it seems, or everybody would do it.
When you get a job, do you like read the whole book first? Like, what's that kind of process like? What's your preparation?
So the process is to read the full script through. You don't want to get in the booth, record the book, and get to the last page where he said in his Irish accent, and you were supposed to do the whole book in an Irish accent, right? So it's not only to make sure that you know the details of like the voice quality, but also in thrillers, which I do a lot of, you need to know who the murderer is so that you don't, so you're careful not to give anything away. Like something I think about is when a mystery author does like the first chapter and the murderer is speaking, but they say this mysterious voice. It is very hard for a narrator not to give the beginning of the book away because we do have to make a voice choice, right?
Never thought of that.
Or when things are spelled out, when, like, I'll just give an example. The word magic, MAGIC, but then there was an audition I recently did that was about witchcraft. And so they have a K at the end. So the sentence was, it's spelled magic. It's spelled magic, not magic. But if you're just hearing it through your ears, you wouldn't know that that's a different spelling unless it was literally spelled out for you.
So then how do you handle that? Magic.
No, I say it was spelled magic. M-A-C-I. Wait, M. I can't
Yeah.
spell. Anyway, you spell it out.
I
You
got it.
spell it out.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. See, that's stuff I would never even think of. Wow.
And now knowing it, because we have writers who listen to this, think about that when you're writing, because audiobooks are such a huge sales aspect of your books. Maybe keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's important to just watch out for, like, if you're going to use vocal qualities, you don't want to give anything away. Also, if you want a character to have an accent, please be as descriptive of that as you can be. Like, I have a couple books where they're like, he was from this foreign country that's unknown. And I'm like, I don't know what voice they're supposed to have. Or if a person grew up somewhere but then lives somewhere different, would they? You don't know when they moved. And like, some people don't want to say if there's an accent or not. But it's just an interesting thing to think of. If you don't want to put it in your book, once you get your contract as far as audio goes, just be sure that you communicate with your publisher very clearly what characters like need which vocal quality traits. That'll help the narrator.
Do you get to speak with the author or ask them any questions, or not really? That's kind of separate.
Generally, the communication just stays between the publisher and the author. But if I have questions, I can send the I can send the publisher a list of questions, and then it'll go through the proper channels and the author will get back to me. Okay. It also depends how I'm working. Like, if I'm working directly with an indie author, then I would talk to them. But generally, authors usually don't have direct contact with narrators. And like, I have mixed feelings about that because it is a project that an author has spent a lot of time on. And I know it's your baby and you really want to make sure it's taken care of. And so being able to have access to talking with the narrator to explain all of that would be really helpful. But there are also sometimes when those boundaries get crossed, there's a certain amount of creative control that needs to be released. And you need to allow and trust that the narrator is going to deliver the story the best they possibly can. Right. And so that's also why that boundary's there, is to help protect the narrator. If we're being micromanaged, not going to feel free to do the performance that we need to do. And I think, unfortunately, books suffer for that. That's why it's really important when you're choosing your narrator, don't listen to just one sample they've done. Listen to several. Listen to a full book if you have or at least an hour of a book. You can get the book on Libby for free. If you can get a custom audition, that would be the best, right? Yeah. Have that narrator read your words. Because it's hard. It's a 3-minute audition you get to choose, and they're going to narrate your whole book. That's a big commitment, but you can do a lot more research on your own than maybe what the publisher will give you to ensure you'll have a good experience.
When you were talking about reviewing like a lot of times, like if you're on Amazon or whatever, you review the book, but like, where does someone go to actually review the narrator?
On Audible, mostly. Yeah, that seems to be the place that I find them. I personally haven't used anything other than Audible and Libby, but I think there's Chirp, there's Libro FM. I don't know about their review process, but probably wherever you can listen to audiobooks, there's probably a review platform there. There is also, I know, 2 publications, Library Journal and Audiophile Magazine are 2 places that I know specifically review audiobooks, not just like, this book was great, like a listener would say. It's like an actual publication.
Cool. And there was a guy who came into my antique shop. I'm looking to see if I can find the book. And he's done like all the books of this one series. He said to me, I was talking about a certain book, and he goes, "Do you know who the narrator is?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "No one knows who the narrators are." It's like, no, people will rattle off the names of the authors, but people, don't really necessarily pay attention to who the narrator is. And now I've started trying to pay attention. There's a woman who narrated, and of course, can I name her off the top of my head? No, but she narrated a book called The 8, 25 hours, and it was amazing. All the different accents she used and how she would change her voice from male to female. And oh my gosh, 25 hours of pure joy. It was fantastic.
Right. It is really cool how a narrator can elevate a reader's experience so much.
Susan Denker. I'm probably saying her last name wrong. This is also a job hazard. You always want to know how to say everybody's name.
It probably stresses you out.
Susan Denker. Let us know, Susan, if we said your name right.
That's right. And Susan, just for the record, you're awesome. And such a huge project. So when you let's go back to Megan Tusing. When you look at a book and you see that it's just ginormous, like a 25-hour book. That could actually thrill you because you're like, okay, this job is going to last a while. Like, and I like this book and I like this project. I mean, there's certain things about books that make you more enthusiastic to narrate that one and maybe less enthusiastic to narrate a different.
I don't know that the length of a book is necessarily discouraging to me.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a project I'm excited about and the story is like moves, sure, why not? Because if you think about a series, for example,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like a continuous book,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's got its nice buttons and things, but I've narrated series with 9 books in them. That could be considered a 20-hour, 40-hour book. So the things that get me excited, clearly if it's like a fun, well-written book is always the best.
Mm-hmm.
But I like strong female characters who are like facing adversity and coming out the other side, just knowing themselves more. And like, I like being the voice of the character who is finding their voice, per se.
Mm-hmm.
But also I've recognized there are certain genres I just really gravitate toward. And as an actor, you kind of can get pigeonholed in a genre. So I've just started teaching casting directors where I want to, what they're going to build they want to put me in a box. I'll build the box for them and say, put me in this one.
I
Mystery
love that.
thriller is just like, I love it. It's so, I think the thing I like about it, I used to do a lot of romance, and I think it's, maybe thriller authors won't like hearing this, but there is a bit of a formula in that I know there is going to actually be a happy ending at the end of a thriller because you're going to catch the bad guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where that the romance is they have a happily ever after. And so, but it's like a darker version of that. And I think it also keeps me, I like being on my toes. I like not knowing what's coming. And that is the thing that's different than romance, is romance is often comforting because you kind of know the shape of the story and there's going to be some
Mm-hmm.
fight and then they'll make up and be together forever. But with mystery thrillers, there's so many options of how the twists and turns can happen, of all the different types of characters that you can come up with. And I also like it just being grounded in a possible reality. There's something
Mm-hmm.
fun about that to me. So yeah, I think it's just, I know that the bad guy's going to get caught. So there's going to be like this nice dopamine hit at the end, but how we get there is my favorite part. I also love literary fiction, women's fiction specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Inspirational nonfiction also is fun for me. I love, for pleasure reading, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg was a book
Mm-hmm.
I listened to as an audiobook because I just love learning about how our minds work or how we can improve systems or just how we can better ourselves. Just helps me go throughout my day. So when I get paid to read a book about how we can improve different things or just how we as humans can bond and treat each other better, that's also something I really, really love. So that gets me excited. It doesn't have to just be those 3 genres. It's
Mm-hmm.
mostly just when I read a description, I'm like, oh, I just feel like I really relate to that story.
Yeah.
I get excited.
Is there anything you like won't do or you like rather not?
It's taken me a little time, and I have the privilege that I've built enough of a career that I'm at a point where I feel comfortable saying no to certain things. This isn't always the case because I'm working on a current book that does have this in it, but usually sexual assault, any kind of non-consent, because as an actor, you're living through the experience. It's something that stays with me, and I don't necessarily want that in my body. It's not that the story isn't well written. It's not that it's not good, but that's a personal boundary for me. I have a whole no list. Unnecessary torture. I'm not good with a lot of violence. So
like I'm writing a book right now that takes place during the French Revolution. So that would be a no.
there was a book that I had considered, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a mystery, but it tilted a little on horror. I'm not that familiar with horror, but
Yeah.
there was just like mutilation of a victim that I could not handle. Like just cutting someone up.
Yeah.
It was a little too descriptive. But
Yeah.
the thing is, it's not a hard line because everything is, like I just said, there's a book that does actually have some sexual content in it that I'm doing right now. But the story I really related to, and I read the sections before I accepted the job, and I was like, you know what? This amount of discomfort is enough, is okay for me because I know the story is important to be told.
Yeah.
So it's really a case-by-case basis. But there are some things that, like, I know it's a no for me. So I'm like, well, wait, if I'm interested in the story, I'm going to ask the producer, where are the sections? Because I want to read them and see if I'm comfortable with it. And then if I read it and I'm like, even if this book is so good, it's just crossed that line. It's really hard to just give a blanket no, because every story is different. I don't know that war bothers me necessarily. It's more just, I think it's more like a person murdering someone intentionally, not through war.
I also find that sometimes there's books where you're reading it and you're like, it just does feel unnecessary. It's like shock factor where you're like, you kind of got the point across already. Like having 5 pages of torturing someone, it's just like excessive.
But there are genres like that. People want that. And
yeah, some people
are,
love that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like similar to how audiobook narrators are like ice cream to listeners. Books can be like that for narrators. Like I did a lot of romance, but I've realized I'm not really in a place I want to narrate explicit sex scenes anymore. I did for a long time. That's just my flavor of ice cream right now. But I do think those books are very important and need to be told for audiences who need those for like their own exploration and healing. And just because I don't want to do it doesn't mean that there isn't somebody else out there who wants it and wants to read that.
I want to ask you about the difference between working for, like a big publishing house like Penguin Random House or working for indie authors. That has to be wildly different. For all of you who can't see us, Megan is sitting in her own sound room that she has at her own home. And I'm trying to look to see what those walls look like.
They look like egg cartons, when you have a mattress on your bed that we call the egg carton mattress topper.
Oh,
that's basically what they look like. But I'm in a 7 foot by 6 foot by 4 foot phone booth, basically, with like thick walls, egg carton padding.
And that's in your home.
Yes.
I'm geeking out. That's really neat.
The story of how I got this booth is I was bright-eyed, brand new, hadn't booked a single job. And a lovely gentleman who I just met at my first audiobook networking event let me talk his ear off, took me under his wing, told me all about audiobooks. And then he was like, I have a client who's looking to get out of the business and sell her entire setup. Are you interested? This is called a whisper room. It's sort of like Legos. You can take it apart wall by wall and then just put it back together. And she was selling her microphone and her computer and her recording software, like the whole kit. I hadn't booked a single job. And I said, yep, I'll take it. Because I thought, worst case scenario, I'll just sell it if it doesn't work out. But here I am.
It did work out. So you bet on yourself. That's
I did.
Awesome.
I just knew. I was like,
I love that.
I want this bad enough. I'm going to make it happen.
Do you have a preference as to like working with authors or working with publishers? Like they're so different. It's probably hard to compare the two.
I guess it depends honestly on the author and my experience with them. I just did a book with an indie author I've done several books with who I love working with because we just really jive. I love her writing. It's so funny. Communication. That is the biggest thing. If I can communicate with you clearly, if we can get on the same page, if you can trust me to do my job and you get me what I need, vice versa, if there's that trust built between us, it can be a beautiful relationship. When I say communication, like it's important for me to be clear with you about what your expectations should be. Like this is how the process works because a lot of authors don't know. So it's a bit of education that I have to do to help you understand what's happening and why we do certain things that we do and also why you're paying for what you're paying, right? So it takes some time to do the education if they haven't ever done an audiobook before. And then we just make sure that we're communicating clearly throughout the whole process. I have a contract that we enter in and just making sure we both feel good with that. And then as we go, there is definitely more input that an author gets when they're working directly with a narrator. Again, though, those boundaries need to be set up for both of us as to how much artistic freedom do either of us have, making sure that communication is clear about pronunciations. Like if the character's name is spelled C-A-R-A, is it Cara or Cara? And we need to get that clear because if that's the main character's name and I say it wrong for 8 hours, that's a big problem, right? So it's all, and that could also happen with a publisher. Clear communication and just both parties feeling excited about the project, I think is the most important thing for me with working with an indie author. It's a lot more hands-on because I'm not just the narrator, I'm also the producer. So the book I just did was with a co-narrator. So I also had to find and hire the other narrator. I had to handle finding the post-production team, which I have people I work with on a regular basis, but also freelancers. I have to make sure I'm setting up the schedule. And scheduling is like a magical skill that,
yes,
like people who are audiobook producers or like project managers, they are saints because they have to deal with they're like in a video game where things are just constantly flying at them and they just have to make their way through the maze. So there's needing to not just do my job as a narrator, I also have to wear all these different hats. So it can be very enjoyable and equally rewarding, but it is a lot more work. So when I work with a publisher, I'm only doing one job, which is being the narrator. And that can be great, but it also does mean I have less access to the author, less creative, maybe input over the whole project because I don't get to hire who the post-production person is. But I am able to do more projects because I'm only handling that one thing, where if I was doing more producing, that would take up more time. So I mostly do projects with publishers, but I do have a company called Little But Fierce Productions that works with indie authors.
Which we will link to in the show notes in case you're interested.
Yeah.
What I guess we really want to know, if you could give authors a piece of advice about having their book narrated, whether it's working with them as an indie or whether it's for them releasing all the power to the publisher, like what do you wish authors knew about the audiobook world?
That's a tough one.
We could make it fun. What kind of margarita do you like? On the rocks with salt?
Let's ask the tough questions. I guess I'm thinking of someone who's a dear friend right now who is an author and just got her offer for her first audiobook deal. I'm so excited. So she and I have been chatting about what do I need to do? How do I need to prepare? So what I've been saying to her is do your research about the narrators you want. Of course, if you sell your rights, there's only so much choice that you have around that. And even if you don't want to do research, they're going to send you names to look up. I would say, just like I did before, right? The whole ice cream thing. Go to Audible, listen to their samples, go to their website, go research them and try to get a good picture of their body of work and see if they're a good fit for what you're looking for. And I'd say have like 3 choices, right? Your top 3 in order of preference because also you may have a book that has multiple points of view. So you may have a multicast. Do that with every voice or every character that's going to be voicing the book. Get clear on the voice that you want and make that request. And if it's possible, if you're selling your rights, ask for narrator approval to be put in your contract. Most publishers will involve the author in the process because they want you to be part of it. But a little extra protection you can have to make sure you get a voice that you want is putting that in your contract. Also, just communication. If you can provide clear details about, the publisher should ask you for this, but like a breakdown of the main characters. Casting also, thank goodness, has started moving more toward authentic casting. We've still got a long way to go, and it's still a very flawed process, but I'm not going to play a Black woman. That's not my story to tell. So make sure that you include someone's background and ethnicity and race and also just general experience of where they've lived their lives, because then they can match that character with a narrator who has that lived experience. So I think it will be even a more rich audiobook. And also be open to white characters being narrated by someone who's not white. That's also helping to erase this very unequal balance that's happened in the publishing industry. So I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
It's a good one.
It's also good advice.
Being clear with your character descriptions. And also, let's say you have a fantasy book with a lot of made up words. Create a list of all the words and a pronunciation guide. You could just get on your voice memo and say the words. That's probably the most helpful. I do best if I can hear somebody saying it and then I can parrot it back. That, I guess, would be my advice if you get your book deal.
Very valuable, because I feel like most people are probably just excited to get a book deal. I never would have thought to be oh, give me narrator approval. That's great advice. So thank you.
Love it. And also, I will never write fantasy because I can't deal with all the made up words. And
there's a hilarious reel or TikTok somewhere of someone reading a fantasy novel and they're like, they walked through the valley of and then they went to see because the people, when you read fantasy to yourself, I don't know how to pronounce the words, so they become mumbled little things.
I can actually listen to fantasy, but I can't read it because of that, because I'm they're telling me what it sounds like.
And there's funny debates I see. I haven't read The Crown of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get eaten alive for this, Akhtar. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Court of Thorn and Roses.
Yep. Sorry, everybody. We're butchering that. I know it's a really big deal. But there's I think I've seen memes of people debating the main characters' names and how they're pronounced. And people are like, Yeah. Anyway. Pronunciations.
Well, this was wonderful. So we really, really appreciate it. And I am so excited that you guys thank you both for turning me on to audiobooks because I'm a huge fan and now have an absolute new appreciation for that art form because that's exactly what it is. Do you still act?
I've made the choice to just fully commit to audiobooks. I do miss the stage a lot, but you have to hustle, right?
Yeah.
To do that other part of career and or that other art form. And I guess I've just gotten to a point where I only have enough energy to do one hustle. And this one just satisfies every little part of my being because I get to act every day.
Yeah.
And my little Virgo, type A self gets to do the business side. I get to make spreadsheets. So it's all the things. I get to do my own schedule, which often with film and TV, you're at the mercy of the studio's schedule. So I do miss acting. I mean, I act every day, but I miss acting with another human, I should say, on a stage. So maybe something like that will float my way. But right now, this is really fulfilling all my little needs.
And you're obviously very good at it. So congratulations to you.
And we didn't even get into what it's like working with another narrator. Do you record everything separately or are you somehow hearing what each other is saying?
It's different for every book and also depending on the publisher. Audible, I just was at their office and they showed me their awesome multicast room where they'll have people come into the studio if they have a multicast project and that's so cool. Then I would love to do that sometime where they get to actually have the actors in the rooms reading with each other. That's rare, but it does happen. And is becoming more trendy. But for the most part, I'm doing another book right now with another narrator. The way we coordinate is we both prep the script, then we check in about characters that overlap, making sure that our voices, I'm going to sound different than he will, but I don't want to have the main character be a high bubbly voice and he does a deep sultry voice. Then we're going to sound super off. So we just make sure we're in the same vein and that we're making sure pronunciations are lining those up so we're not saying Ciara or Cara wrong, right? Just, again, communication, just making sure we're in touch and on the same page about things. I've had books that are not that complicated and we don't have that many character overlaps. And I've also had people where we had to keep a spreadsheet to keep track of all the characters and pronunciations. And we had a Dropbox folder where we uploaded 30-second clips of us reading a line by each character so we could go back and refer to it. So the level of complexity depends on the project, but generally it's just about communication again.
I have to say, it sounds like a fascinating career.
I'm so grateful every day that I get to do this as my job. I had an awesome day job when I worked in a corporate office. I had such supportive coworkers. I would go do a TV show and they'd all be like, we watched it last night. And you can't ask for more than that. But I didn't have a passion behind that job. And so I had a friend tell me when I was leaving my day job, coming to do this full time, I was so scared. And he said, your worst day as a narrator will be your best day at your day job.
True.
He was right. It's just a gift that I get to do this for however long I get to do it. I never would have guessed I would end up here. If you would have asked my 20-year-old self, I never would have guessed I'd be here. It's interesting because on stage or film, I guess mostly on stage, because you do the play and then you can go out and actually meet the audience afterwards.
Right.
And this, I just get in the booth. It goes into the microphone. It goes to get processed with the other folks on the team. And then it's gone. And I don't know the effect that it has on people unless I choose to go into the reviews, which I have learned is not a good idea. But what's really nice is when I get an email or through my website sometimes, I'll get really kind messages from listeners who are like, that book was amazing. Thank you for, I also know other friends who have been told the story that they narrated helped them get through their mother's cancer. Or the story that they narrated helped them get through a really difficult time in their life. So when I hear things like that, even if it's not directly to me, then I can sit in this booth and be like, I'm narrating this for somebody who needs this out there because stories are as old as time, right? That sounds like Beauty and the Beast. Tale as old as time.
That's true.
Yeah, but like we need stories. That's I think part of how we continue to make it through everything that's so hard right now is we have a place of refuge in books. And I hope that never goes away.
I have an Audible credit, and I want to ask you, what is the book that you would recommend for me that you've narrated? Because I want to go listen to one of your books that you would recommend for me to go read. What was one of your favorites to do?
Oh gosh, that's like Sophie's Choice.
I know.
Off the top of my head, I really loved Before She Finds Me by Heather Chavez. That was one of my favorites last year. I just did her last book also called What Will Burn Last. It got nominated for a Sovas Award. Yeah, she's just a great writer.
Well, I'm going to go get that because I'm nearly done with the one I'm listening to now. Thanks for the rec.
Megan, thank you so much. You really helped demystify the audiobook narration process.
Thank you for having me on. It was just such a delight to talk about it. Honestly, I'm in here talking to myself most of the time, so it's nice to have somebody else to talk to.
The Story Will Save You is a Pipeline Artists original podcast. Like, subscribe, and follow us on social media at Pipeline Artists and at Book Pipeline. For more information, visit pipelineartist.com and bookpipeline.com, where we have contests for unpublished manuscripts as well as for published books that would make great adaptations for either film or television. Learn more about our efforts to help writers find publishing success on bookpipeline.com. Until next time, let the story save you.